Please welcome our moderator for this session, Phocuswright analyst for Europe, Peter O'Connor. Peter, over to you.
With airport security becoming increasingly a pain in the bum, customers are increasingly searching for alternative ways to reach their destination. Welcome to today's session on getting around on the ground. I'd like you to welcome my panel. Firstly, we have Ian Brown, CEO of rentalcars.com. Rod Cuthbert, CEO of Rome to Rio. Will Phillipson, co-founder and president of Silver Rail Technologies. And Jan Raoul, CEO of Kelbile. Gentlemen, thank you for participating this afternoon. Just as an icebreaker, I asked each one of you to prepare one sentence to explain what your company does. Let's start with you, Ian.
Deep breath. So with rentalcars.com, we've got the world's largest and best converting car hire platform. We're working really hard with Rideways to do the same thing across broad ground transportation, and both of those are available to partners through Rental Cars Connect.
Rod.
Rome to Rio is a transportation search engine. We help people figure out how to get between A and B anywhere in the world.
Will.
Silver Rail provides the digital infrastructure for the passenger rail market.
And last but not least, Jan.
Kelbile is a French company. We help travelers to find the right option for their 100 to 1,000 kilometers journeys by comparing the different modes of transportation, train, plane, and also ride-sharing and bus.
Thank you very much. I think it's quite interesting that at this morning's Travel Innovation Summit, many of the companies that were presenting were either directly or indirectly connected with the issue of ground transportation. I'd like to ask the panel, do you think this sector is going to continue to exist as merely auxiliary revenue and pale into significance in comparison with the air and the hotel sector, or do you think it's actually going to become significant in itself? Why don't we start with you, Ian?
I think it's pretty significant already. I think everyone's eyes got opened by Uber. But if you look at the revenues that the sectors that all of us are representing, there's I think, north of $200 billion worth of revenue there. So I'd say that's already a pretty significant vertical.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think if you think about the online travel industry, we started with all the focus on Expedia, Travelocity, lastminute.com, etc., pure OTAs. The big focus was on air. Then it shifted to the kayaks, the meta-search companies of the world, Skyscanner, Booking.com, companies focused on hotels. And now just naturally, it's embracing a larger ground. And ground is the key there. It's the way people travel, so it's got to be part of the overall scene.
But Rod, just to play devil's advocate, why is it taking so long?
Well, the technology is much harder. The GDSs were there at the very start of computers and airlines. They were like right there at the beginning, so it was always relatively easy to go into a travel agent and get a ticket on any plane in the world. The technology infrastructure was there because of Sabre, Galileo, etc. But with ground transportation, it's always been incredibly diverse. Some operators had this system, some had another system, some had no system at all. So it wasn't easy just to turn on the switch and make it happen.
Will, I've often heard Silver Rail described as the GDS of the train industry. Would you agree with that?
We're much nicer.
You're much nicer?
Yeah, I think as Rod started to describe, GDSs on the airline side started out with airlines 50 years ago or more. Rail, like much of ground transportation, is extremely local. At least at the national level, if not even more local than that. So the idea of a global solution of global connectivity hasn't existed in the ground sector at all, which is why it's so complicated. Each solution in every part of the world has grown up on its own. There are more train stations in the UK than there are airports in the world. Makes it very difficult to unify codes, to make it standardize how you describe products and things like that. Silver Rail, at least for the rail part of the problem, is trying to standardize that, make it accessible, make it available to consumers everywhere in the world, both locally and globally. That's not exactly the same mission as a GDS, but in many ways provides a similar sort of service of enabling retailers who connect directly with consumers to be able to access that content.
I guess this question's both for Rod and Jan. Would you prefer to be dealing directly with suppliers, or would you prefer to be dealing with somebody who aggregates like Silver Rail?
That's a really interesting question for us right now, because we've found recently that the rail
Are you in
operators-
negotiations right now with Silver Rail?
No, well, we have a partnership with Silver Rail. We just launched rail bookings in the UK via Silver Rail. It's terrific. We're working on Amtrak, we're working on Spain, all via Silver Rail. At the same time, rail companies are coming to us directly and saying, hey, you know what, you can work with us directly without going through a middleman. I mean, we'll talk to anybody and we'll do the right thing economically and system-wise for us and for our customers. I don't think that there's a black and white answer. It's better to go through a company like Silver Rail or distribution for bus, or it's better to go direct. I think it's going to be a mix.
How about you, Jan?
Except for flights, which is clearly an alternative for us, we are working only with direct partnerships. We want to be close to our clients, which are partners. Our service is free for users as a meta. And for us, it's important to keep this relationship, this direct relationship with bus carriers or rail operators.
Okay, rail is really the simple part, because as you said, there's relatively, and at that, Will laughs skeptically, but there's only a limited number of rail companies out there. Okay, car hire, again, not too bad. But what we're seeing right now, I think, is we're seeing a lot of bus companies, we're seeing the growth of peer-to-peer, we're seeing many alternative ways of actually getting to your destination. Will you guys be able to integrate these services into your solutions?
Well, I'll jump in there and say the approach we take is to fish where the fish are. We look at what people are searching for, and we look at what the solutions are, and we say, hey, it'd be really good if we had lots of German buses, because people are searching for routes that are served by German bus lines. So it's sort of, we just follow the money. Sure, there are, maybe there's a whole lot of bus operators in Bangkok. Believe me, you probably should walk or take the train. That's not something we need to go after.
Okay, Jan, how about you?
There is absolutely no standard in our industry, so we need to invent our own standard. So I think each company here has its own standard to define what is the train station in Dublin, for example. So it's a huge work. There is no standard for that. And for BlaBlaCar, for example, there is no station. So how can you perform a search without station? So it's almost all about geolocalization too.
I think it's also a pattern that we've seen before. The market is incredibly immature. This happened in the airline space, in the hotel space, and in technology in general. As the market starts, everybody jumps in, tries to define their own way of doing things to solve this complex problem. And over time, the winning patterns emerge, and there are companies, technology companies and otherwise, that build solutions, that it eventually becomes more economical to use a common platform or common solution and focus your innovation as a retailer on the thing that's going to convert customers. Because ultimately, the train content or a coach, bus coach, or even a car sharing, the content is ultimately very, very similar, if not the same. And having different ways of connecting it means throwing away a tremendous amount of energy, repeating, building the wheel, inventing the wheel.
I'll just pick up on something Jan just said, which is how can you do a search if you don't have a station? I think the way people actually travel is they travel from home or a hotel or an office or somewhere like this, a convention center. It's not a station, it's a place. And I think it's a transition that the industry needs to make, is to allow people to say, I want to go from my current location or my home address or the Hilton Hotel, and I want to go to this other place, which may or may not be a station. That's something that Google allows you to do. We're a search engine. We've taken the same approach. And I think eventually that model will bleed into other travel sites.
Ian, you're probably the one who's going to be most affected by the growth of car sharing and even peer-to-peer car services like Uber and so on. Do you guys have any plans to blend that into your service offering?
We have a lot of ideas, and the one thing that's
Okay, do you
certain
have
about
any
Priceline
concrete
Group,
plans to blend that in?
if you take a look at the site, we're testing some stuff. We will test anything, we'll try anything, and just to pick up on this discussion, we've got several 100 million customers a year across all the Priceline Group companies and across all of our strategic airline partners, OTAs. We're trying to do something relatively challenging, which is just help those guys get around. So whether it's a taxi they want, a bus, a train, exec car, that's why we've built Rideways as part of Rental Cars Connect, is to just help those customers get around and complete their trips. Exactly as Rod's saying, wherever they start from, wherever they're going, that's what we're trying to do.
In probably most of the other parts of the travel sector, we've seen a lot of consolidation in recent times, both in the OTA sector and also in the supplier sector. I mean, basically, if it's not nailed down, Priceline will buy it.
Not just Priceline.
Do you think that's going to happen in the ground transportation sector?
Directed at me?
Whoever wants to jump in.
All right, I'll start.
Well, seeing as you're the guys with the big checkbook, let's start with you.
Glenn Fogle's got a very big checkbook. And actually, in all seriousness on that one, we're not alone in making acquisitions. I think if you look at what Glenn Fogle and the team have done in the last many years, whether it's Booking.com, Kayak, RentalCars.com, OpenTable, I think their record of smart acquisitions that drive value is unmatched and hugely impressive. In the ground transportation space, I'd be very open. We looked at a number of options. We thought actually maybe we would enter this space through an acquisition. But as we went and looked at several options, we didn't find a combination of a team, a tech stack, a commercial, an operating model, or frankly some value expectations that made sense. So we decided to build it ourselves and partner where it made sense for product. So with Rideways and through Rental Cars Connect, that's what we're doing.
Will, how about you guys? You've been very, very specialized until now. Do you see yourselves going out into the other areas of ground transportation? Or are you a train company, or are you a getting people from one place to another company?
I think we're both. Silverrail started out in the rail space. We've made 2 acquisitions over the past 3 years. One of them does door-to-door journey planning and powers several cities and regional authorities around the world, and allowing people to take multiple modes of travel to get to where they need to be. And another one does multimodal bookings, where you can book within Sweden from anywhere to anywhere, covering train all the way through to taxis and other modes. And I think that's natural, because very few of us, and this is kind of the wrong audience, because I know some of us here probably do, sleep at airports and live in hotels and things like that. But as Rod was saying, the general public does like to go from wherever they are to wherever they need to be. So that evolution of technology, of contextual awareness that technology will provide through interfaces will grow and mature to the point where it will be natural to pick up your phone and say, get me to my meeting, or it will tell you your meeting is somewhere and this is what you need to do. Technology just hasn't been there. Standards, processing power, and all the rest of those things. And I think that will make the sea change. And change, I think one of the biggest things that we need to be careful of is that in the past, travel has been very, very specialized because you needed a lot of knowledge about this industry. And organizations like Google are changing that. They're showing that, Google and Apple and others, that enough processing power and enough information and tagging can get that information to customers in a very different way than those of us in the industry that know airport codes and what they mean. So there's a paradigm shift coming on that front.
I have a question for the panel. Can you talk a little bit about some of the opportunities in the corporate travel space and being integrated into travel management companies, for example?
Yeah, I'll jump in there. We just started an experiment with TripIt. All those companies who have trip in their name, they sort of confuse you. You sort of you're about to say trip something and you want to say trip something else, but I think it is TripIt. They have a lot of corporate users, and what they wanted to say to them was, okay, you've got a flight in here from Singapore to Tokyo, then you need to get downtown. If you get that wrong, Singapore to Tokyo costs you a couple of $100 for a flight. The taxi costs a couple of $100 from the airport into the city. So you get that wrong, you've really blown away all that saving. So they wanted to help people to make good decisions about that last mile. And already in the experiment, they're seeing terrific take-up. People really like the ability to figure out the last bit of their trip. not everybody, unlike you probably, Lorraine, has a guy holding up a sign at the airport waiting for them. A lot of people get off the...
That costs money as well, huh?
Yeah, probably. A lot of people have got to figure out for themselves.
In fact, this business is a low-margin business with high volumes, and I think it's mostly a mass market. So I think when we study the audience we have on our websites and mobile sites, we see the main goal of the user is visit friends and relatives. It's not about professional business trips, and the motivation is quite different from the existing goals. When you go to Expedia, it's usually not for visiting friends or relatives. It's mostly for our business trips or travel. So I think ground transportation is quite different from the previous existing area.
How about you, though, Will? Does your agreement with Expedia extend to Agencia?
No, we have a separate agreement with Agencia. Rail in particular is very attractive to the corporate market from an efficiency perspective to an environment and many other factors. And I think the driver that we see in the corporate market is most of this ground transportation stuff, if you will, has been supported in some way, shape, or form, or used by the corporate market for a long time. The challenge is the extra requirements that the corporate market has with the duty of care and expense management and things like that. And that's driving, as these solutions come to the market, to provide that information, to standardize the way information is done. The corporate market is getting very interested in that. Particularly security was brought up earlier. You know, stuff is happening all over the world, and particularly with corporations, they need to know where their people are. It's no longer good enough to know that somebody landed in Bangkok, but where are they? Did they make it to the hotel? What else is going on?
And do you do the last mile as well? Do you include the expense reporting element and link up with some of the systems that are being used by these big corporations?
It's an ongoing process. You know, unfortunately, there's so much fragmentation, thank you, in the back ends of the corporate market. We're working on each one at a time to try and solve that as well.
So no,
Not completely. Or as we like to say in rail, it depends.
Yeah.
No, the word is not yet.
I'm a friend of Will's, and I like thinking that his answers are like often waiting at a level crossing for a big freight train to go by. Just when you think it's finished,
Just keeps
another
on coming.
carriage comes along, another sentence or two comes along at the end. It's a terrific analogy.
So let's throw another train onto the train line there. So I think it was Will mentioned the Google word earlier on. So I think every session today has mentioned Google at some stage. Particularly, I think for Rod and for Jan, do you think that Google's latest initiative, particularly its Trips app, is that going to be a big competitor for you moving forward?
I think anything that Google does is a competitive issue for anybody in the travel industry. It's like an existential threat for travel companies, particularly intermediaries, that Google, who have made so much money out of all of us advertising with them, are now turning around and competing directly with us. This is wrong. Having said that, they also do a pretty lousy job of a lot of this ground stuff. We constantly blog about it, and they call us and say, "Hey, that was right. You know, we'll fix that eventually." But they whilst they do a good job and they've got a great product, you know, integrated within Google Maps, some of the results they show are just farcical. And I really think they ought to fish or cut bait. They ought to do it well or don't do it at all. Leave it to travel companies that actually specialize in this.
Okay. How about you, Ian? What do you think of this new app?
Actually, I'm going to go a little bit contrarian on this one. We spend a frightening amount of money on Google, but they are very good partners. And as long as we can maintain that great relationship and are developing stuff together, I think Google's done many great things for the travel industry in terms of, you know, accessibility of information, simplifying stuff, and allowing us all to get to customers we would otherwise previously have struggled to. As far as the app's concerned, I'm personally waiting to see mode. We'll take a look at it, and I think if it's like other things that you know, the Google team have brought to market, it could be pretty interesting.
Jan? You're a smaller player. You're probably the one most at risk.
I don't know if I'm a small player, but
No, I didn't say you're a small player. I said you're a smaller player.
we last year we drove 40 million euro. We generate 40 million euro for our partners, mostly in Europe, in 5 countries: France, UK, Germany, Italy, and Spain. I think Rod did the answer about Google, so it's okay. To be frank, I didn't download the Trips app, so I cannot really give you insights.
So I think that's something you really need to do. Let's look a little bit in the future. If we look at other transportation sectors like flights, they've almost become loss leaders for many of particularly the OTA companies that are out there. Do you think that's going to happen with ground transportation? Is it just going to become something that you, as an OTA, they will have to sell, but they're not going to make a lot of money out of it, and they're going to make their money from other sectors like hotels? Or do you think that there's juice there that can be squeezed? I'll go with you first, Ian.
I think it's a little different. Honestly, transaction value is lower per ticket, so 3, 4, 5 nights in a hotel versus jumping in a cab, that's much, much lower transaction value, so there's only so much margin available to play with. Having said that, air is right at the beginning of the customer journey and the funnel for a lot of people, so therefore it's a natural thing to cross-sell products into. It kind of drives, as you said, the loss leader piece. I don't see ground working in the same way, except maybe certain customer occasions and journeys with train where you decide...
You live in the UK, don't you?
I do live in the UK.
No, I live on continental Europe, so for me the train is definitely...
That's where I was going. For certain train journeys, I'd see that, but I don't see ground in general being the first place people go when they're booking their trip. So I don't see it playing out the same way.
Will, what do you think? You think it's just going to become a commodity?
It already is to a certain degree. It's not accessible like a commodity, but the average ticket price, the fact that particularly on the rail side, it's largely government funded, market contracts, things like that. I don't really know of anyone who goes into the rail sector, never mind ground transportation in general, to make it rich. So the big OTAs and those that are looking at it, I suspect are doing it because of where they make their money, like they do with airlines, which is on everything else. And I expect that to continue. There will always be space for specialists, which goes into the very broad, shallow, starting with Google, getting more focused as you go along to the deep specialists on the other end that might be able to extract revenue, but you've got to be very, very focused to do that in the ground sector.
Rod, how do you think the business model is going to develop for people like yourself who are somewhere between the supplier and the customer, not necessarily engaging in transactions, but how's it going to develop from here?
Well, we're trying out a few things, bringing the bookings onto our site so that we've got more control. So, to your last question, so that we can also sell people a hotel, because we think that's important. And you can certainly make a lot more money selling a hotel for somebody who's going to London for 5 nights than you will on the Eurostar to get them there. But to your larger question, the goal we have is that somebody can come on our site and book a bus in Brazil 1 week, and then a train in France, and then a plane in Australia, and for them to say, hey, they had my details, the UX was fairly consistent, that's a site I'll go back to for any of my travel needs. We think that's a more holistic and realistic view, sort of 5 years out, than one that's very focused on just ground or very focused on just hotels or flights.
And with that, I'd like you to thank my panel.